Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Julia. I work with Juniperis to create content that will help everyone improve their marketing strategy and really get an understanding of the crazy marketing world that exists around us. I am a freelance writer, a social media coordinator, and a communications manager. I focus on helping small and nonprofit brands stand out and tell those authentic stories that we all have, but make sure that those stories reach the right people, which almost always involves some form of social media. So, you probably already know that whether you're managing a professional business account or you're just dreaming of those influencer level follower accounts, or you just like sharing, pictures of your brunch and your pet once a week. I think we all kind of have this understanding that social media can be kind of hard. I think that its biggest pro is also probably its biggest con. It can bring people together for good, and it can bring people together over the kind of bad or questionable things. Sometimes, brands or you'll post things with one intention, but once that thing goes live, it can be kind of shockingly scary. People respond in a way that you weren't quite expecting. They're responding in a way that makes you wonder, where did you go wrong? And I can say all this because I speak from experience here. I think there should be an official rule that you're not really a social media manager until you've been trolled in response to what you thought was a pretty innocent post. So today I wanted to talk about what to do when you're the one or your brand is the one bringing people together over basically an epic social media fail. So first, let's get ourselves in the right frame of mind. Say you have published this post. It can be literally anything. Think about the last post you published. But let's assume it's already out there. It's already out into the world, and you are just starting to get that weird feeling. I always get it in my stomach where I'm kind of like, where you're thinking, maybe something's not right. Maybe I did something wrong here. Your immediate next step should be to simply read the room. One of the reasons I love being a social media manager is because I just get to take my time scrolling through my feed and have that be an actual part of my job. And it sounds silly, but if you're going to post on social media, you have to understand social media. You need to know the language. You need to know what's trending. You need to know which topics are pretty much off limits. And you need to have a general understanding of how your people and your audience are going to respond to any given topic that you might post. So when you see your post starting to come across as questionable and getting some not so positive feedback, consider how your post may have come across, not just to your followers of your brand, but also with anyone who might have come across it. We all know that share button on Facebook. Once you post that, it goes out to everyone, not just the people that are following your page. Humor is often only humorous to a specific part of the population. Slang or modern trends or references can isolate older followers, and a poorly timed post can come off as really insensitive. This KFC commercial, I'll use as an example. It was kind of weird. It features customers just kind of chowing down on KFC's chicken, their fried chicken, and they're clearly enjoying it so much that they start licking their fingers. They're just like licking the chicken off their fingers. And at one point, they like it so much that other customers start licking the chicken off of other customers' fingers. It's really weird. On a regular day, it might be perceived as uncomfortable, but maybe a little funny. But in particular, KFC decided to release this commercial in February of 2020 of this year. Uh, I probably don't have to remind anyone that that is right when the COVID-19 global pandemic was just starting to show up in the news cycle. People were just starting to get a little bit concerned. Um, I don't expect brands or any of us to be able to predict these global trends and see what might, become a larger issue. But, if KFC had stopped for just a second and, you know, done a quick Google search, I mean, maybe look through their feed even, they would have seen that something is starting to happen that will make close contact, probably a pretty bad thing. And I like to think a good rule of thumb is that if you have to question your content for even a second, your audience will question it too. If you have to read through your post 2 or 3 times thinking, is somebody going to take that the wrong way? Or, is this a weird time to be posting that? If you have to even consider that, the answer is probably yes to both of those questions. It's hard, and it's hard to kind of take that super cautious approach, but in today's world, that's definitely what brands need to be doing before posting. Um, but okay, say your post is out there, you're starting to realize that maybe it didn't quite land the way you wanted it to. The next step you should take is to simply read the comments that exist on your post, read the replies, read all of that. Once those comments start popping up, there's really no going back. Of course, your intentions were probably not to sow division or to, become a joke. But if that's what your post did, you have to act really quickly to come up with a plan of action. And without knowing what people are saying about your post, about your brand, you can't really come up with a plan that effectively addresses the root issue. So Dove brand had to do this when a post they sent out in 2017 went viral, of course, for all the wrong reasons. It's basically, it has a series of women, different colors, changing presumably because of the Dove soap. So in particular, it has a black woman wearing a brown shirt. She takes off the shirt, and underneath there is a white woman. Um, a lot of people started to question it and wondered, is Dove implying that if we use their soap, you know, you can turn white, so will it remove my skin color? It was just strange. Was it well intentioned? Was it careless? Was it racist? We really don't know because we weren't in Dove's marketing team when they came up with this post. And regardless of their thinking behind it, the impression it left on viewers must now kind of live in the planning behind every post Dove uses from here on out. Um, Dove wouldn't have even noticed this issue, I doubt, if people hadn't started commenting and speaking out against this problem. So the next step after you've started taking in the feedback from your followers, either your followers or just everyone on the internet, do your research. Take to the search engines, figure out the context in which your post was taken. Figure out the history of this issue that you unknowingly kind of commented on. So Snapchat is a good example of this. They posted to their, the Snapchat feed that's on their main page. They posted a poll. It was such a weird poll. I don't even like saying it. But they posted a poll asking users if they would rather slap Rihanna or punch Chris Brown. Most of us know that there's a history of violence between these two celebrities. Snapchat may have even known this, and that may have been part of the reason they wanted to kind of weigh in and get people, I don't know, engaged, activated around this debate. But what Snapchat probably didn't know is that approximately 1 in 4 women, meaning 1 in 4 of the women using their app, have experienced some form of physical violence from an intimate partner. As soon as this poll got shared and the feedback started rolling in, Snapchat should have done some searching and understood that by sharing this post on Rihanna and Chris Brown, they were commenting on this. They were making light of this huge issue that affects so many people. A lot of people obviously reacted really negatively. They were like, you shouldn't have done this. This was in such poor taste. Snapchat owned up. They issued a really hasty apology, but ultimately called their own story or their own post, they called it disgusting. How bad does it have to be for you to call your own post disgusting? So figuring out exactly where your post went wrong and why it went wrong and why people reacted the way you did can not only lessen the chances that your mistake will happen again, but it'll also help you craft an authentic response. And when the time comes to craft an authentic response, it's important that you check yourself. This is the next step. Um, there may be a small number of times when you know and are okay with the fact that what you post on social media, it may irritate some followers. It's not going to be all happy like smiley emojis, like, and that's okay. Some brands are built on delivering these hard-hitting, impactful, fact-based messages that they know might come across as political or spark debate. Um, government is a really good example of this. They're supposed to deliver news and real data on what these agencies are doing. That's impartial for the most part. The official Air Force Twitter account apparently missed this memo, and they tried to weigh in on a trend that was going viral at the time. And this is another thing; it's very hard to describe, but it was this audio clip of a man saying Yanny and or Laurel. It was one of those, it was like the blue or gold black dress debate where everybody who encountered it had a different opinion on what he was saying. Um, and the Air Force apparently thought this was funny, and they thought they could spin this in a way that worked for them. So they tweeted a post that said, the Taliban forces in Farah City, Afghanistan would much rather have heard hashtag Yanni or hashtag Laurel than the deafening, it's like a gun noise. It's like, brr, I can't do it, but gun noise. Would have much rather heard Yanni or Laurel than the deafening gun noise they got courtesy of our hashtag A10. So it's kind of hard to see the good intention behind a tweet like this. And I don't really think there's a good response the Air Force could have issued that would have more or less fixed this mistake. They were trying to be funny at the expense of human lives. Very few people came to their defense, and so the Air Force knew pretty quickly after that they were in the wrong, not their followers. It was not their followers' opinions that were making this mistake. It was the Air Force's mistake. And while they issued an apology tweet pretty soon after, the damage was done. It's hard to come back from something like that, and especially when the Air Force brand is not just representing the Air Force, but it's the military, it's the government. It's always, there's such a broader context that you have to read into, and apparently Air Force did not quite read into that. But they responded as they had to. There's really only one thing you can do when these things come out, and that's fess up. Um, and while I say that's the only thing you can do, there's a million different ways to fess up. Once you figure out that your post didn't land like you would, you have to let honesty be a guiding force in whatever response you craft. Definitely the time in which a brand could simply spit out an empty, generic, kind of PR glamorized apology, that cannot happen anymore. If you as a brand are not transparent about not only what went wrong, how this mistake happened, but how you're going to fix it, you're not only just being shady, but followers will probably end up figuring out that truth for themselves down the road. All things will come to light. And that could potentially hurt your brand even more. So if your newest marketing campaign comes off as discriminatory, figure out if your marketing team even considered how all of your audiences would perceive the message. If you published your casual post at the same time as a not so casual world event, come clean, admit that you didn't know this was happening at the same time that you shared it, and that your team is doing this and this and this to own up and to respond to whatever kind of derailed your message. And if your joke was insensitive, own up to the fact that it was insensitive, and you'll try to be better in the future. Chase Bank, sharing another example, is a brand that did issue something that came off as really insensitive. They attempted to weigh in on the Motivation Monday trend by having a conversation between a bank account and the their user, their customer. And basically that conversation implied that the reason the customer's balance was so low was because the customers were spending too much on coffee and cab fare. And this, by the way, coming from a company whose top executive made $31.5 million in 2019. People knew that, that those were two very different perspectives. And so for a company who makes that much money to be criticizing just like an everyday person's bank account problems, it just came off as really tone deaf. I will say I kind of like how Chase Bank handled this. They came clean just an hour later, really cleverly tweeting, our hashtag Motivation Monday is to get better at hashtag Motivation Monday tweets. Thanks for the feedback, Twitter world. Sometimes that's really all you can do. And while it doesn't really address the root issue of income inequality and the daily financial struggles of millions of Americans, this response is still meaningful from a marketing standpoint. In this response, Chase Bank owned up to the fact that they missed the mark. They admitted they hoped to do better in the future, and they even went so far as to thank those who called them out, all while staying consistent with their lighthearted tone and voice that they've kept throughout their entire Twitter feed. Um, and that's just one example. There are so many examples of brands publicly coming clean about their errors, but it is worth noting that sometimes no response is the best response. And that's hard to come to terms with. If the negative comments are in the single digits, maybe you reply to those naysayers directly, letting them know you're sorry for any trouble or inconvenience your message caused and offering ways to help them fix the issue, directly. If the negative comments are coming in droves, however, don't be afraid to tag team your response. Check with your boss, check with your marketing team if you have them. If you don't have them, check with your mentor or even a professional crisis communications team to handle any larger issues bubbling up to the surface because of a poorly thought out social media post. And that's the thing is, you know, social media, a post, yes, it is one instance, it is one post in the probably, hundreds of, if not thousands, that you put out on a daily basis. But when it's taken the wrong way, it can reveal something about your company that you may not have wanted to reveal, or you may not have wanted to imply about your brand. So the next step in all of this is just move on. Ultimately, I really doubt your goal was to upset your followers or to stir controversy, but those followers didn't get upset on their own. A mistake you made in your social media process is ultimately that's what caused them to get upset. It's a really hard truth that has honestly taken me years to come to terms with. But if your post goes south, it is your responsibility to take that whole experience as a lesson and figure out what to do now immediately in response to the post, but also what you can do moving forward to prevent this from happening in the future. So, whatever you decide to do in response to all this, know that the drama will eventually subside. It goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of this. Social media's pros are sometimes its biggest cons, and vice versa. It's social media, it moves so fast that pretty soon your post, your mistake, at a certain point it will be old news. And another thing to keep in mind is that social media it's kind of relatively young. It's only 20 years old. When you compare that to excuse me, television and print, these really old forms of media that experts have understood for decades and decades, it can be hard to understand and really know how to navigate social media like a pro. You're doing your best. Keep on doing your best. Keep your head up. And I promise, we'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this. We've all been there. And I have no doubt that, putting some thought into your response and your post in the future, you'll be just fine. So that about wraps it up for me. I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure to stay connected with us on social media. We will try our best not to post anything like the bad examples we discussed here today. But thank you again. Bye.